Hello and welcome. My name is Caitlin. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm really excited to share these books with you. I just want to do a little disclaimer. This year I made it an intention of mine to read more books that were recommended by people. Normally I would just seek out books that I know that I'll like or that I'm really interested in. And this year, because people would recommend things to me, I tried to say yes to it as much as possible. A lot of the books that I did like, I didn't have time to finish, and so I won't review them here because I want to make sure that I read all the way to the end before I give a public review like this. These are the ones that I read. There's 17 of them. I guarantee you will have heard of some of them before, and I guarantee you will have not heard of some of them. Let's get into it. The first one was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It is about a psychiatrist who lived through a Nazi death camp in World War II. He used all of his experiences and the things that he learned while he was in the camp and applied it to his practice of psychiatry and came up with this theory called logotherapy. His philosophy on life is amazing. I didn't want to read this book for a long time. I don't know why, I just kind of avoided it. And then this year my friend recommended it. I said, okay, I will read it, and I'm so glad that I did. I recommend this book to everyone. It is the perfect blend of memoir and science. It changed the way I look at life for the better and helped me make my life more meaningful and understand what it is to be human and how there is no point in suffering needlessly. But if you are required to suffer, you can create meaning out of it that makes your life incredible. Go read it, it's so good. The next book that I read is Range by David Epstein. I actually did pick this one out for myself. It's really hard to describe what this book is about, but technically it's about how there are lots of specialists and then there are people who are generalists. And people who are generalists have a wide range of experience in many different fields, or maybe they worked in one field for a long time and then made a career change into a different field. And it's all about how doing that actually creates a lot of innovation, and people who are less experienced in a field can sometimes notice things that people who are very experienced in a field don't notice. It's really, really interesting and fun to read. The book's all over the place. You never get bored. This is actually my favorite book of the year. Alright, the third book was a book called A Primate's Memoir, A Neuroscientist's Unconventional Life Among the Baboons. It's by Robert M. Sapolsky, and this was also recommended to me by a friend. And I was excited to read it because the author wrote the book Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and I've heard really good things about that book. And so I was like, neuroscience, how could it be bad? But I really didn't like it. I think I just don't like his writing style, and I don't really care for his personality. I should have known, since it's a memoir, that it would be more about him, but I was really hoping it would be more about neuroscience and what he learned from the baboons. If you are interested in national parks in Kenya, this would be a great book for you. I'm really glad that I read it because it forced me to learn a lot more about a country that I don't know anything about, and I learned about baboons, which is cool, but I wouldn't recommend it in general. The next book I read was a biography of J.R.R. Tolkien by Michael White. I chose this book because I wanted to read more biographies. I read Malcolm X's biography and it's amazing. I read that last year, or the year, excuse me, in 2020, I think. And so I wanted to incorporate more biographies. And so I chose this one because I love Lord of the Rings, but I really loved learning about J.R.R. Tolkien. Really did not like this biography. And the reason why is because Michael White just throws his opinion in there all the time as if it's fact. So he'll just say things like, oh, this is what Tolkien was thinking when he wrote his books. This is how he felt about his mother, and that's why he put this in there. And I'm like, you don't know. Like, he doesn't explain. And I know this because I read a journal entry by J.R.R. Tolkien that specifically said this. He's just making all these conclusions about J.R.R. Tolkien's thoughts. To me, someone's thoughts, especially an artist's thoughts, unless they tell us what they're thinking, we'll never really know. It's kind of like this mystery that you read the biography to get kind of close, but you never really know. I don't mind if a biographer puts their opinion in the book, as long as they say, this is my opinion, or this is what I think happened, or this is what I think motivated the author. But when the biographer just puts things in there as if they're facts, that really, really rubbed me the wrong way. I would recommend reading a biography of J.R.R. Tolkien, but not this one. So then, to comfort myself, I ordered this book, Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I read this book when I was younger. I just want to read you the back because it'll explain better than I can. Sophie has the great misfortune of being the eldest of 3 daughters, destined to fail miserably should she ever leave home to seek her fate. But when she unwittingly attracts the ire of the Witch of the Waste, Sophie finds herself under a horrid spell that transforms her into an old lady. Her only chance at breaking it lies in the ever-moving castle in the hills, the Wizard Howl's castle. To untangle the enchantment, Sophie must handle the heartless Howl, strike a bargain with a fire demon, and meet the Witch of the Waste head-on. Along the way, she discovers that there's far more to Howl and herself than first meets the eye. It's so easy to love the characters in this book. It's so charming. Obviously, it's young adult fiction, so I mean, don't be looking for like an epic fantasy. Really soft world building, but really fun, and just takes you away to a fun place. And then there's a really good Miyazaki film adaptation of it that you can watch afterwards. So I picked this book up at a used bookstore, and the title is Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Never heard of him, but the Pulitzer Prize caught my eye, and so I bought it and read it. I read it super quickly. It's really delightful. It's about a man who, he's aging, and his longtime boyfriend is now getting married to somebody else. So he's just kind of sad and starts to travel to kind of find himself. When you read this book, you just feel like you're walking through a painting. Like somehow it's modern writing, talking about modern things, and yet there's like a timeless style to it. If you're someone who really appreciates quality writing, you will like this book. It was just such a good moment in the year for me to read this. So the next book I read was also a fiction. It's called Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson, and I read this book because a couple of my friends really loved it and recommended it to me. It is about it's a Regency romance. Need I say more? Marianne Daventry will do anything to escape the boredom of Bath, so when an invitation arrives from her twin sister Cecily to join her at a sprawling country estate, she jumps at the chance. Thinking she'll be able to relax and enjoy her beloved English countryside while her sister snags the handsome heir of Edenbrooke, Marianne finds that even the best laid plans can go awry. If that's what you're into, you will absolutely love this book. It has really high ratings. It's fun, it's quick, and I enjoyed it. Next, I read a book called Archaeology from Space by Sarah, I think she pronounces her name Parcak, so Sarah Parcak. The cover really attracted me to it, and archaeology is fun and interesting. And the book is interesting. It's about how archaeologists are now using satellite imagery to find archaeological dig sites, and actually sites that have been looted, and then sites that are at risk of being looted. She talks all about how she thinks that the future of archaeology is going to be unlike anything we've ever imagined. There are lots of little like stories, like she'll splice in these fictional stories that I think are supposed to make you interested in like how important it is to study the people who lived in ancient times and whose stuff we're digging up now. But like it didn't really hit for me very well. So I really just wish that I had read an article to get the content rather than having to read the whole book, because it's almost like she tried to make it longer than it needed to be in order to have a book to publish. This one I was so excited for because everyone talks about this book, and Reese Witherspoon loves it, and there's a show and blah blah. Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And it is a well-written book, I will give it that. Just for me, I couldn't get into the characters, and the plotline seems so preposterous. It's about this woman who's running from her past, and her unique and wild personality kind of causes waves in this town. I don't want to give spoilers, but it's just hard for me to buy the plotline. Like I just couldn't suspend my disbelief enough to get into it, and I didn't like any of the characters enough to look past some of the silly things that are in here. I know people really like it, but I did not. So then I read Mistborn because I told my husband that I would, and honestly, if you like fantasy, it's just inevitable that you're gonna pick up a Brandon Sanderson book. It's great. I mean, it is as good. I mean, everyone likes it for a reason. I will say that Brandon Sanderson, sometimes his writing just goes on, and I don't care for his dialogue too much. I know most people really enjoy it, but I feel like he gives so much exposition in dialogue that doesn't make sense. Like characters are explaining things about the world to other characters who clearly would already know that thing about the world. And there's no excuse for it because, for example, in Harry Potter, we're learning everything about the wizarding world through Harry's eyes, so it makes sense that people are always explaining to Harry Potter what things are and how things work, and so it's a very convenient way for the reader to also learn, and it feels really, really natural. Whereas in this book, there's also a character who's learning new things. I feel like he could have just either used that more to his advantage in a more natural way, or since he's writing a book, just write it in there and say, this is how it is, dear reader. But instead he just puts it in the dialogue. It's just kind of clunky for me. So, I mean, I hate to hate on Brandon Sanderson because everyone loves him so much. And don't get me wrong, I'm gonna read the rest of the book. So, and I enjoyed it. And if you like world building, you will love this book. It's really, really intricate, really, really well thought out, amazing plot, huge variety of characters. It is about this girl named Vin who has been pretty much abused her whole life. And she's a thief on the streets of this big city in this country that is oppressed by anyway, it's a great fantasy. I just have my few complaints that I have to get out there. Okay, more fiction. I read The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This is the book that Bridgerton is based on, and I just was really curious about it. I saw it in the bookstore and just grabbed it. She's just such a committed writer, and the characters are just very well rounded in my opinion. I don't know, it was fun, it was light. Not gonna read any of the other ones in the series though. Then I read Hidden Figures. I read this in a book club, and I was so happy to read it because I've been wanting to read it for a long time, ever since the movie came out. If you're not familiar, Hidden Figures is about Black female mathematicians who worked at NASA and helped achieve some of the most amazing space achievements that we've had. The movie is nice, but the book goes into so much detail about so many of the women's lives. I know some people don't care for it just because it's really historical, and it's kind of dry in the sense that it's not like flashy or meant to be this hero's journey the way the movie is. It's more real and just tells about real people living real lives. I was so impressed by the talent and the heart that these women had and how hard they were working while also raising their families, and then the Black community at this time and what was going on with them, and also the greater NASA community. I learned so much stuff about history that I never knew. I really, really recommend this book. It was very enjoyable and would be well worth anyone's time to read. Next, I read Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This one's kind of, I think it's kind of trendy. I've just like heard about it a lot. And I would not have picked this out for myself. It's about these children who were abducted and then put into this orphanage and then essentially sold / adopted. The woman who was running the orphanage was a really bad person, and it's based on a true story, so it's a little bit heartbreaking, but it goes back and forth between the history of the children and then some characters who are in the future who are discovering the story. For that reason, it kind of makes it lighthearted enough that you can get through it without just being devastated by how sad it is. Like I said, I wouldn't have picked it for myself, but I am glad that I read it because I had no idea that this had happened in history, and I think it's just good to know about that kind of thing. Okay, next I read Cry, the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. I read this in a book club as well. It is about two fathers in South Africa in the early 1900s. One father is a Black minister in a small village, and then the other father is a wealthy white farmer who lives basically in the same village, just like outside the village. Their lives end up intertwining in a very tragic way through the murder of the white farmer's son at the hands of the Black minister's son. The first half of the book is told from the perspective of the Black minister, and the second half of the book is told from the perspective of the white farmer. Both of them go through important changes and growth, which is fun to read because a lot of times you're reading books that are coming of age novels or whatever, and this is a story of men who are in the sunset of their lives experiencing modern problems that their parents had not experienced, and all the changes that intersecting cultures and capitalism bring to a nation. I thought that the writer did a really great job of capturing this time in history and not shying away from the tragedy and the hatred and the racism, and also writing a story that still hoped for a better world and made me want to be a better person. One thing about it though is that the way it talks about women is a little bit questionable, but it didn't undermine the value of the book to me. So then I read a book called The 20-Minute Networking Meeting Graduate Edition, Learn to Network, Get a Job by Nathan A. Perez. I obviously read this for school, but it honestly was really, really helpful if you are trying to make an advancement in your career, or if you are a student trying to get your first job. Highly recommend, super quick read, really helpful. Everything in it is just really, really, really poignant. I have followed the advice in it and it's been helpful. The next book that I read was also a book that I read for school. It's called Exposure by Robert Billet. Robert Billet is an attorney. He has spent almost his entire career fighting chemical companies who leaked chemical waste into water, which ended up really hurting a lot of people. Companies were pretty sketchy. Some of the things they did were really sketchy. And this is a true story. It's kind of scary because this chemical is actually probably in all of our blood, because it is the chemical that is used to make non-stick pans and then a lot of other products that end up in our life. So made me scared to drink water. I don't think this is a book that everyone would be interested in. Obviously, if you're interested in the law or the court system or politics, it's a great story. There is a movie adaptation of it that I have not seen, but I would be interested in seeing. And then if you are interested in the story, the information, but you didn't want to read the whole book, I think you could get everything that you would want to know from some articles. It was great for me as a law student, but not something I recommend to everybody. Okay, the final book that I finished in 2021 was a book called Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting, The Astonishing Power of Feelings by Lynn Grabhorn. This is a book that I feel like I'll just end up reading every 10 years because it's so positive and so impactful. It's about the law of attraction, so if you're not interested in the law of attraction, don't read it. If you are interested in the law of attraction, I think it's a really good crash course. Essentially, when you read it, you start to take a lot more responsibility for the things that happen to you in your life. It's like the opposite of victimhood. And I think a lot of people think the law of attraction is just like chilling on your couch and manifesting millions of dollars, and that's not what it is at all. Highly recommend this book if you're just feeling at kind of a low point and you want some motivation to change things around and incorporate a new mentality that can help you achieve the life that you want. I have to say though, I looked up what happened to the author and no one really knows. It's like a tragic mystery, and so that kind of spooked me out, but I still think the book is really, really good and I would still feel comfortable recommending it. Those are all the books that I finished reading in 2021. I hope that you enjoyed these reviews, and I would love to know what your book recommendations are, what your favorite books are, what genres you like. Let me know in the comments. I really appreciate you watching this video and I hope you have a great day.